It was a quiet Saturday morning in the small, well-kept neighborhood. Birds chirped on the fences, and the sun shone brightly over the rows of neatly painted houses. Most people were enjoying their weekends, mowing lawns or having coffee on their porches. But for Alex, today was going to turn out to be anything but quiet. Alex had been walking down the street, taking a deep breath of fresh air, when he noticed something unusual near the corner of the neighborhood. A small group of people had gathered around a table, and colorful signs read, "Free gas for everyone." Alex thought it was strange. Free gas? Really? That could not be true. But curiosity got the better of him. He walked closer, smiling at the people handing out little cards and stickers. "This is too good to be true," Alex muttered to himself. He picked up a card and looked around. Everyone seemed happy. Some neighbors were laughing, taking selfies, and joking about how lucky they were. Alex smiled and decided he would take just one can of free gas to try it out. He didn't want to take too much, he just wanted to see what this was all about. But little did he know, someone was already watching him. Mrs. Henderson, known to everyone in the neighborhood as HOA Karen, was standing a few steps away, arms crossed, lips pressed tightly together. Her sharp eyes followed every move Alex made. She had a reputation for following every neighborhood rule to the letter, and she had a habit of making a big scene whenever she thought someone was breaking the rules. When she saw Alex pick up a small can of gas, her face tightened. "What is he doing?" she whispered to herself. "Does he even know this is an HOA community? Rules exist for a reason." Alex didn't notice her glare. He was too busy chatting with the volunteer handing out the gas. "Wow, this is really nice of you," he said. "I wasn't expecting this at all." Meanwhile, Karen was already pulling out her phone. Her fingers moved quickly over the screen, and her lips pressed together as she dialed a number. Alex had no idea that in just a few minutes, things were about to spiral completely out of control. The volunteer smiled at Alex. "You're lucky. These events usually don't last long. Take what you need, and be safe." Alex nodded, thanked him, and carefully lifted the small can of gas. He didn't take much. Just enough to try. But Karen was watching every second. Her eyes narrowed as she whispered to herself, "This is not okay. He doesn't have permission. I'm calling the police if I have to." Alex finally turned to leave, but Karen stepped forward suddenly. "Excuse me," she said loudly. "What do you think you're doing?" Alex froze. I'm just taking a free gas," he replied, trying to smile politely. Karen's voice rose. "You can't just take things like this. Do you even live here? Are you following HOA rules? This is unacceptable." The people around them started turning to see what was happening. Some were amused, others confused. A few neighbors whispered to each other, shaking their heads. Alex felt his heart start to race. What had started as a simple, harmless act of getting free gas was now turning into a confrontation. He tried to explain, "It's free for everyone, it's part of the event. I'm not doing anything wrong." Karen didn't listen. Her phone was already at her ear. "Yes, I need to report someone. They're taking things they shouldn't," she said, her voice sharp and urgent. Alex's stomach dropped. Police? Over free gas? It sounded ridiculous, but Karen seemed serious. Alex glanced around at the neighbors. Some were starting to record the scene on their phones. He felt trapped in a situation that had escalated in seconds. He had just wanted to check out a free gas event, and now, he might be facing the police. Karen was still muttering into her phone, pacing back and forth. "I can't believe this, rules are rules," she said. Her eyes never left Alex, and Alex could feel her judging every move he made. He took a deep breath. "Okay, maybe I should just leave," he thought. But as he turned to walk away, Karen shouted, "Don't move. You're not leaving until this is sorted." The tension in the air was thick. Neighbors were whispering, some trying not to laugh, some just watching. Alex felt like he was in the middle of a storm that had nothing to do with him. All he had wanted was a small can of free gas. Now, he was standing face to face with a neighborhood legend, a woman whose idea of fun was enforcing rules nobody else remembered. As Karen continued pacing and speaking urgently into her phone, Alex felt the dread building. He wondered, how did a simple morning walk turn into this? How could someone overreact so much over something so small? And most importantly, would the police really come, and would he really get in trouble for this? Little did Alex know, the next few minutes would be even more intense. The calm morning was gone, replaced with tension, fear, and suspense. And the audience, everyone watching, was left wondering, could free gas really lead to almost getting arrested? The story was only beginning. The moment Alex turned to walk away with his small can of free gas, the air seemed to shift. The quiet hum of the neighborhood was replaced by the sharp clicking of Karen's heels on the sidewalk. She didn't just walk toward him, she moved with purpose, like a storm heading straight for its target. "Wait right there!" Karen's voice cut through the morning air, startling Alex. He froze mid-step, the can of gas almost slipping from his hands. Alex turned slowly. Hello," he said cautiously. "I don't think I." "Don't think? Don't think?" Karen interrupted, waving her phone like a sword. "Do you even know the rules of this community? Do you know what you're doing is completely unacceptable?" Alex blinked. He had lived in the neighborhood for over a year, but he had never met anyone like Karen. She had this way of turning even the smallest act into a major scandal. I didn't mean to break any rules," Alex stammered, trying to keep calm. "It's just free gas, everyone is taking it. It's part of the event." Karen's eyes narrowed. "That's not the point. Rules exist for a reason. You can't just take something without asking for permission." "Permission? Do you even hear yourself?" Alex swallowed hard. He could feel his heart racing. People on the street had started stopping to watch. Some were whispering, others were filming on their phones. The tension grew with every passing second. Karen took a deep breath and leaned closer. "I've seen this before," she said, almost in a whisper, though her voice was sharp enough for the neighbors to hear. "People think they can get away with small things, but it always starts small. Today it's free gas. Tomorrow it's who knows what." Alex tried again to reason with her. "It's just an event, free for everyone. I didn't take more than one can. I'm not causing any trouble." Karen's face twisted in disbelief. "Not causing trouble? You think this is harmless? Harmless? I should call the authorities right now." She lifted her phone again, tapping the screen furiously. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. He couldn't believe this was happening. Over something so minor, Karen was about to escalate the situation to the police. A small crowd had gathered now. Some people looked confused. Others tried to hold back laughter. One neighbor whispered, "She's really calling the police over free gas?" Karen didn't care about the whispers. She had her mission. "Yes, I'm calling the police. Someone must be held accountable for breaking the rules." Her voice had that mix of anger and self-righteousness that made it clear she truly believed she was saving the neighborhood from chaos. Alex took a step back, gripping the can tighter. "Wait, please. Can we just talk about this?" Karen shook her head, her finger pointed accusingly. "Talking? No! This is serious. I am not going to let someone just take things freely like this. You will answer for this." The volunteers at the event tried to intervene. "Ma'am, it's free for everyone. There's nothing wrong." Karen waved them off, her fury undeterred. "I don't care what you say. Rules are rules. And someone must enforce them." Alex looked around helplessly. The neighbors were recording now, some whispering, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The whole street felt like it was holding its breath. Then Karen did something Alex didn't expect. She stepped closer, lowering her voice slightly, but her tone was even more menacing. "If you think you can walk away, think again. I know the law. I know how to handle people like you. I'm calling them, and you're going to explain yourself." The fear in Alex's stomach turned into panic. He had never felt so small in public before. And just like that, the peaceful morning had become a scene straight out of a nightmare. As Karen's phone rang, Alex glanced at the small can of gas in his hand. Something so simple, something so innocent, had turned into a high-stakes confrontation. And in the next few minutes, things would escalate in ways he could never imagine. He wondered silently, can this really get me in trouble? Over free gas? The neighbors, sensing the tension, watched silently. Everyone waited. Some held their phones, ready to capture the chaos. And Karen, standing tall and self-important, smiled to herself. She knew she had created a storm and Alex was right in the middle of it. Little did Alex know, the next call he heard would make his heart race even faster. The police were on their way. Alex stood frozen on the sidewalk, gripping the small can of free gas as if it were a lifeline. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. Karen's phone was pressed tightly to her ear, her eyes never leaving him. She was muttering sharply into the phone, and each word felt like a strike. Yes, someone is breaking rules, right here, in our neighborhood. Karen said, her voice rising. They're taking things they shouldn't. I need the police immediately. Alex's stomach sank. Police? Over free gas? It sounded absurd, almost like a bad joke, but Karen was deadly serious. He looked around. Neighbors had stopped what they were doing. Some were peeking through their windows, others had come outside to watch. Phones were already recording the scene. Alex felt the weight of every pair of eyes. Panic began to creep into his mind. I swear, it's free for everyone, Alex tried to say. His voice was shaking. I didn't take more than one can. It's... Karen cut him off sharply. Save it. They will decide if you're in trouble. Don't talk. Just wait. The minutes felt like hours. Alex glanced down the street, expecting to see the flashing lights of police cars any moment, but all he saw were calm streets and neighbors whispering in disbelief. The tension was unbearable. He could feel his hands trembling, the can of gas almost slipping from his fingers. Suddenly, Karen's eyes lit up. Yes, they're on their way. And I'm staying right here until this is sorted. She glanced at the crowd, raising her voice. See? Someone has to protect this neighborhood. Alex's mind raced. He tried to think clearly. Okay, just stay calm, he muttered to himself. But how could he stay calm when the situation was spiraling completely out of control? Then he heard a distant siren. His heart jumped. The sound grew louder, echoing between the houses. People started murmuring nervously. Karen straightened her posture and smiled proudly. They're here, she said smugly. Now they will see who is right. Alex's stomach twisted. He had never felt so helpless in his life. Over free gas, he was about to face the police. What if they misunderstood? What if Karen exaggerated everything? As the sirens approached, a patrol car slowly turned onto the street. The red and blue lights reflected on the windows of the houses, making the scene look like something out of a movie. The neighbors' whispers grew louder. Alex could feel their eyes on him, every second increasing his anxiety. Karen raised her phone again, ready to give another dramatic report. Yes, they're almost there. He's still here, holding the gas. I don't know what he's planning. Alex swallowed hard. He wanted to run, but he knew that would only make things worse. He took a deep breath and stepped forward slightly. Officer, please. I didn't do anything wrong. Karen's glare was sharp, cutting through him like a knife. Officer, she said loudly, as the patrol car stopped in front of them. This person is breaking rules. They are taking things they shouldn't. The officer stepped out, his expression calm but curious. He looked at Alex, then at Karen. Okay, what's going on here? He asked, his voice firm but neutral. Karen began recounting everything with dramatic flair, her arms flailing as she explained the crime. Alex could feel his heart beating faster with every exaggerated word she spoke. The officer raised an eyebrow, listening carefully, but Alex could tell he was already questioning her story. Neighbors had now gathered closer, some shaking their heads, some trying not to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. Alex felt like the whole street was watching him. He held the can of gas tightly, praying this nightmare would end soon. The officer finally spoke. "Okay, slow down. Let's take a deep breath and figure out what actually happened." His calm tone cut through the tension like a lifeline. But Alex could still feel Karen fuming behind him, ready to twist the story any way she could. Alex took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "It's just free gas. There's a community event, everyone is allowed to take one can," he explained, keeping his voice steady despite the fear creeping into his chest. Karen scoffed. "Event or not? Rules are rules," she snapped. The officer nodded slowly, looking at Alex, then at the small can of gas in his hands. "All right, let's make sure we understand everything before jumping to conclusions," he said. For a moment, the chaos paused. Alex could feel the tension hanging in the air like a thick cloud. The neighbors held their breath. Karen's pride and anger were visible in every tight movement she made. And Alex, he just hoped that somehow, everything would be cleared up before things got even worse. Little did he know, the next few minutes would decide whether this story of free gas would end in embarrassment, laughter, or, he shivered to think, something far more serious. The patrol car rolled to a slow stop in front of the little neighborhood street, its red and blue lights reflecting off the freshly painted houses. The air seemed to hum with tension, every neighbor holding their breath, some leaning out of windows, some stepping closer to watch. Alex clutched the small can of free gas, feeling like a criminal caught in a heist, but all he had done was take a single can. Karen's chest puffed up with self-importance. "They're here," she announced proudly, her voice echoing down the street. "Finally! Someone will enforce the rules." The officer stepped out of the car, looking calm but alert. He adjusted his belt, glanced at the gathering crowd, and then focused on Alex. "Sir, can you tell me what's happening here?" Alex swallowed hard. It's just free gas. There's a community event." "I didn't take more than one can," his words tumbled out quickly, his hands shaking slightly. Karen jumped in, her tone sharp and dramatic. "Event or no event? He is clearly breaking the rules. Look at him, holding the gas like it's treasure. He's not allowed to do this in our HOA." The officer raised an eyebrow, glancing at the small can in Alex's hands. He looked puzzled but patient. "Okay, let's slow down. You're saying there's a community event, and he just took one can?" Karen waved her arms wildly. "Yes, one can. But that doesn't matter. He doesn't have permission. Someone has to stop this before it gets out of control." Alex felt heat rise in his face. He wanted to disappear, to melt into the pavement, to explain this all away, but Karen was relentless. The neighbors' whispers grew louder. Some tried to hide smiles, some just shook their heads in disbelief. The officer crouched slightly to look at Alex's eyes. "Sir, you understand we are here because of a complaint, right?" Yes, I understand," Alex said, trying to sound calm. "But I really didn't do anything wrong." Karen huffed loudly, her hands on her hips. "Wrong? Absolutely wrong. And you are lucky I caught this before it escalated." One neighbor, Mrs. Lee, couldn't help but whisper to another, "Over free gas. She called the police over free gas." The officer let out a small sigh, his expression unreadable. "All right. Let me see the event, the setup, everything." He gestured to the small table of volunteers and the neatly stacked cans of gas. The volunteers, still nervous, explained how the gas was free for all residents. Alex's heart thudded as Karen's expression shifted slightly. She didn't like what she was hearing, but she wasn't ready to admit defeat. "They may say it's free," she said, her voice trembling slightly with frustration, "but rules are rules. Someone should still be held accountable." The officer turned back to Alex, giving him a faint reassuring smile. "Sir, from what I can see, you didn't break any law. It seems like this was a misunderstanding." Alex felt a huge wave of relief wash over him. His shoulders relaxed slightly, and he finally allowed himself a small, nervous smile. But Karen wasn't done yet. "Oh, don't think this is over," she snapped. "I have neighbors who saw this. They'll back me up." At that moment, a few of the gathered neighbors shook their heads and chuckled quietly. Some even spoke up. "Ma'am, it's really fine. He didn't do anything wrong." Karen looked around, suddenly realizing that she was the only one truly outraged. Her cheeks turned red, and she stepped back, muttering something about rules being ignored. The officer, sensing the absurdity, simply nodded to Alex. "All right. You're free to go. No warnings, no arrests. Everything's fine." Alex exhaled slowly, almost in disbelief. The can of gas now felt like a trophy of survival. He glanced at Karen, who was fuming quietly, pacing back and forth. The neighbors, sensing the tension release, began murmuring and laughing quietly. The absurdity of the whole scene, the dramatic HOA Karen, the free gas, the police arrival, was almost too much to believe. Alex finally walked away, still gripping his can of gas, and whispered under his breath, "All that, for one tiny can of free gas." Karen's glare followed him until he disappeared around the corner, still muttering about rule breakers and someone has to enforce the law. But the neighborhood had seen the ridiculousness, and the laughter and whispers began spreading like wildfire. What started as a calm, quiet morning had turned into a story the neighborhood would remember and retell for weeks. And Alex knew that, even though it was over for now, the legend of HOA Karen and the free gas would not be forgotten anytime soon. After the police had arrived, the streets seemed quieter, but only for a moment. Alex stood near the little table of free gas, his hands still trembling slightly. He thought the worst was over. After all, the officer had said he wasn't in trouble. But Karen was far from done. She paced back and forth, muttering to herself, and every now and then, she would glance at Alex with narrowed eyes, like he was some criminal mastermind. "I can't believe this, they're letting him go, but it's not over," she whispered. Alex tried to calm himself. "Okay, deep breath, it's done," he muttered under his breath. He glanced at the small crowd of neighbors who had gathered, some whispering, some chuckling quietly. Everyone seemed to sense the ridiculousness of the situation, except Karen. Then, suddenly, Karen stepped forward again, pointing dramatically at Alex. "Officer! Wait! There's more! He might not have done anything legally wrong yet, but what if he's planning to? I don't know, take more? Or share it improperly?" The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly confused. "Ma'am, what are you saying exactly?" Karen's voice was trembling with self-importance. He's dangerous. He has a can of gas. Who knows what he might do next? I am just warning you." Alex felt his jaw drop. Dangerous? With one can of free gas? He opened his mouth to explain, but Karen wasn't done. He could make the neighborhood unsafe. Or worse, encourage others to break rules. The officer sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, sir. I think we understand the situation. This seems like a misunderstanding." Karen looked shocked. Misunderstanding? She had spent all this time preparing her heroic tale, and now the officer didn't even see it as serious? She shook her head, her hands flailing slightly. "You don't understand. You need to enforce the rules. Someone has to." Alex, trying to stay calm, decided to speak. "Officer, seriously, it's just one can of free gas. The event is for everyone. I didn't do anything wrong." The officer walked over to the table, scanning the neatly stacked cans and the volunteers smiling politely. "Sir, there's no evidence of wrongdoing here. You can see the setup, everything is organized, free for everyone. I don't see any crime." Alex's shoulders relaxed a little, relief flooding him. But Karen's face was turning red, not with embarrassment, but with frustration. She muttered under her breath, "This neighborhood, rules are disappearing, no one respects authority." Meanwhile, a few neighbors couldn't contain themselves. Mrs. Lee whispered to another neighbor, "I've lived here 20 years, never seen someone almost cause an arrest over free gas." Others nodded, stifling laughter. The officer finally addressed Alex. "You're free to go. There's nothing more we need from you." Alex exhaled so hard it almost sounded like a whistle. He couldn't believe it. The tension, the fear, the almost arrest, it was finally over. He looked at Karen, who was still fuming but slowly realizing she had lost this battle. Karen crossed her arms and huffed loudly. "This isn't over," she muttered, but there was a faint quiver in her voice. Even she knew the neighbors were watching, and she could feel their judgment. Alex looked around at the crowd. Everyone was trying not to laugh, some whispering sarcastic remarks, some shaking their heads in disbelief. He finally smiled and said quietly, "All that, for one little can of free gas." Karen's glare followed him as he walked away, but the tension had shifted. The officer gave Alex a small nod, almost like a silent apology for the absurdity he had been dragged into. Alex felt like he had survived something impossible, something completely unnecessary, but the story was far from over. Because even though the misunderstanding had been cleared, Karen's reputation for dramatics was intact. And Alex knew that, in this neighborhood, legends like Karen didn't fade easily. The audience, the neighbors, the viewers of this story would remember this day for a long time. Alex laughed quietly to himself, shaking his head. Free gas, almost arrested, unbelievable. And somewhere behind him, Karen was already plotting her next heroic enforcement of rules, unaware that her audience had completely turned against her, at least in amusement if not in fear. The tension that had gripped the street for nearly an hour began to fade, but the air was still thick with awkward energy. The officer had finished checking everything, nodding politely at the volunteers, and finally addressed the entire group. "All right," he said, his voice calm but firm. "There's nothing illegal happening here. Everyone is following the rules. This event is perfectly fine." Alex felt like he could finally exhale. Relief poured through him like a wave. He lowered the small can of gas and let out a shaky laugh. "Finally," he muttered, shaking his head. "All that fuss, over free gas." Karen, however, did not look relieved. Her arms were crossed, her lips pressed tightly together, and her face was red, not from anger this time, but embarrassment. She tried to straighten her posture, to maintain some dignity, but it was clear to everyone watching that the situation had gone against her. A neighbor whispered to another, "Well, that was dramatic." Karen's voice wobbled slightly as she spoke. I was just making sure rules are followed," she said, as if that explained everything. Alex smiled politely, deciding to take the high road. "Thanks for looking out for the neighborhood," he said. "I guess everyone wants to keep things safe." Karen's glare softened for just a moment, but it was quickly replaced by muttering under her breath about rule breakers and people who don't respect the HOA. The neighbors, however, couldn't hide their amusement. A few chuckled quietly, while others whispered behind their hands. One of the volunteers handed Alex another card from the free gas table. "Here, take one more, just in case," he joked. Alex laughed, shaking his head. "I think I've had enough excitement for today," he replied. Karen, clearly noticing the laughter and whispers, stomped off a few steps, muttering about how people just don't understand responsibility. But even she knew she had lost the moral high ground, at least in front of the neighbors. The officer gave Alex a small nod. "You're all clear. Enjoy the rest of your day," he said before getting back into his patrol car. The sirens faded, leaving the neighborhood unusually quiet, but this time, it was the calm after a storm of ridiculous proportions. Alex finally walked away from the table, the can of free gas in hand, and glanced back at Karen. She was now pacing in the distance, muttering to herself. He couldn't help but smirk. "Free gas, almost got arrested, what a morning," he said quietly to himself. The neighbors, sensing that the situation was truly over, began murmuring, laughing quietly, and slowly returning to their own activities. The little street had been the center of drama for one small act, and everyone seemed to agree, this day would be remembered. Alex decided to take a deep breath and enjoy the absurdity of the situation. "I survived HOA Karen, and I have a story to tell," he thought. A smile crept across his face. Despite the chaos, the fear, and the near arrest, he couldn't help but find humor in what had just happened. And somewhere behind him, Karen continued to fume, unaware that her actions had turned into a story the whole neighborhood and soon, the audience, would laugh about for weeks. The calm Saturday morning had been completely transformed into legend. Alex looked at the little can of gas one last time, shook his head, and whispered, "Next time, maybe I'll just skip free gas." The neighbors chuckled quietly, and the legend of HOA Karen grew even larger that day. One woman, one small can of gas, and an over-the-top confrontation had created a story no one would forget. The neighborhood was slowly returning to normal, though a faint buzz of whispered laughter lingered in the air. Alex walked down the street, the small can of gas in his hand, feeling both relieved and amused. The tension, the near arrest, the dramatic HOA Karen, everything seemed almost unreal now. Karen, still muttering about rules and responsibility, had retreated to her perfectly manicured lawn, pacing back and forth like a general strategizing for the next battle. Her neighbors peeked out from behind curtains and fences, some shaking their heads, some laughing quietly. She didn't notice their amusement. In her mind, she had performed a heroic act of neighborhood justice. Alex stopped for a moment and looked around. "All that, for one tiny can of free gas," he muttered, chuckling to himself. He shook his head in disbelief. The absurdity of the morning had finally sunk in. The police, the neighbors, Karen's dramatic meltdown, it was almost too much to believe. He took a deep breath and thought about what had just happened. Free gas, a misunderstanding, a near arrest, and a neighborhood spectacle, all from a single, simple action. It was a lesson in patience, perspective, and, most importantly, keeping calm when someone overreacts dramatically. Alex turned toward Karen, who was still muttering rules and regulations under her breath. "Maybe some people just like to overcomplicate life," he whispered with a grin. "Rule enforcement can wait, Karen, especially over free gas." As he walked away, he noticed the neighbors subtly nodding or smiling at him. Some even waved in solidarity. For a moment, Alex felt like a quiet hero of the neighborhood, surviving the chaos with dignity and humor intact. Then came the final irony. A volunteer from the gas event called out, "Hey Alex! You forgot your card." Alex laughed out loud, shaking his head. "I think I've had enough excitement for one day," he replied. But he pocketed the card anyway. It would be a perfect souvenir for this unforgettable story. The camera of the audience, or anyone retelling the story, would catch one final image: Karen, still fuming on her lawn, muttering about rules, and Alex walking away, small can in hand, smiling quietly at the absurdity of life. Alex turned once more to the crowd of neighbors. "Life is too short to get stressed over small things," he said aloud, his voice calm but playful. "Sometimes, a little humor goes a long way." And with that, the legend of HOA Karen and the free gas became something more than just a dramatic morning. It became a story that would be retold, laughed about, and shared for weeks. It was a perfect mix of chaos, comedy, and reality that everyone could relate to, a reminder to not take life or HOA rules too seriously. Alex walked home, the sun now high in the sky, birds chirping as if nothing had happened. He smiled, shaking his head. "Next time someone offers free gas, maybe I'll just watch from a distance," he whispered, chuckling. And somewhere behind him, Karen continued her self-appointed patrol, unaware that she had created a story the whole neighborhood and everyone who heard it would never forget. The story ended not with anger or shame, but with laughter, relief, and a gentle reminder: sometimes, the small, ridiculous things in life make the best stories.